here for our YouTube book club, reading this awesome book, The Secret of the Hidden Scrolls. Today we are on chapter 5. Now, as a reminder where we left off, Peter and Mary found themselves in Egypt around the time of, past the time of Joseph, who we learned about on Sunday, way past the time of Joseph, because they met someone named Joseph who said that he was Joseph's great-great-great-great-grandson, something like that. They met the princess Shiphrah, and they also saw the Pharaoh start talking to Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron told the Pharaoh that God said to let his people go. Now, God's people were the ancestors of Joseph, so they were called the Israelites, and they were slaves in Egypt now. And Pharaoh refused to let the slaves go. And Moses performed a miracle. God performed a miracle through Moses, turning his staff into a snake. But then the Pharaoh had his magicians come and do an illusion of turning a staff into a snake to kind of say, well, my magicians can do that too. But they couldn't really. It was more of an illusion. And so now we're going to read chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 is called Trouble in Egypt. Snakes slithered everywhere. Grrr, Hank growled at one that was making its way around the pillar toward them. The snake rose up and was face to face with Princess Shiphrah. Its forked tongue flicked between sharp fangs. Shiphrah stepped back. Mary spun and kicked the snake in the side of the head. It fell to the floor with a thud. Then it slithered away and joined the other snakes. "Thanks," said Princess Shiphrah. "That was close." "You're welcome," said Mary. Peter looked back toward the men. The magician's snake circled around Aaron's snake, hissing and poised to attack. Then Aaron's snake coiled up and darted at each of the others. It swallowed every other snake. Pharaoh glared at the magicians. They hung their heads and slowly walked away. Moses reached down and picked up the snake by the tail. It stiffened and transformed back into a staff. "Is it just me?" Peter murmured to Mary, "or does the staff look a little bigger?" Moses pointed the staff toward Pharaoh. "Now will you let the people go?" "No," said Pharaoh. "Guards, take them away." The guards surrounded Moses and Aaron and led them away from the palace. Princess Shiphrah tapped Peter on the shoulder and whispered, "Let's get out of here before my dad sees us." They ran back into the palace. "That was close," said Princess Shiphrah. "I think the magician in purple saw me," said Peter. "Oh no," said Princess Shiphrah. "He tells my dad everything." "Who is he?" said Mary. "He's the great magician," said Shiphrah. "He has great powers. My dad listens to all he says." Princess Shiphrah led Peter, Mary, and Hank to the other side of the palace. Slaves bowed to the princess along the way. Peter glanced at Mary. She looked as bothered by this as he was. "Why won't your dad let them go?" she finally blurted out. "He's stubborn," said Shiphrah, frowning. She stopped and pointed at a door. "Here's your room," she said. "Make yourselves at home. I'll see you in the morning." They entered a large room with 3 beds. Even Hank had his own bed. Peter closed the door and pulled out the scroll. "Let's see what it says," said Mary. "We won't have much time to solve it." Peter unrolled it on a table in the corner of the room. "It looks like symbols and pictures we saw on the walls of the pyramid." Mary took a closer look. "It's hieroglyphics, just like in the pyramid." Peter grinned. "I was right." Whoosh! A gust of wind blew through the window and almost blew the scroll off the table. Michael the angel flew in with his mighty wings spread wide. "I'm glad to see you," said Mary. "It's been an interesting afternoon." Michael looked at Peter and Mary. I have some serious things to tell you. Mary's eyes got big. What? Mary liked serious things. The Egyptians have a very good life, especially Pharaoh, said Michael. But life in Egypt is about to change. Why? Asked Peter. Pharaoh and the Egyptians have been very mean to the Israelites, said Michael. He pointed out the window toward the slaves who were still working on the other side of the river. They turn them into slaves and they force them to work very hard. They even treat the Israelite children badly. Peter frowned. Joseph was one of those children. Michael pointed to the sky. God has heard the Israelites' cries for help, and he is not going to let them be abused any longer. What's going to happen? Said Mary. You will have to wait and see, said Michael. Now let's go over the rules for your adventure. Michael held up one finger. First rule, you have to solve the secret of the scroll in 14 days, or you will be stuck here. Peter wrinkled his forehead. Why do we have 14 days instead of 7 days? This adventure is going to take a little longer, said Michael. Pharaoh is very stubborn. Hank's ears perked up. He looked at the door and growled. They all got very quiet and Michael disappeared. Peter peeked out the door and saw guards walking down the hallway. They're gone, he said, and gently closed the door. Michael reappeared. I need to hurry in case they come back. Michael held up 2 fingers. Second rule. You can't tell anyone you are from the future. Michael handed Peter the flashlight. I think you dropped this at the pyramid. Oops, said Peter. Hide it, said Michael. Peter shoved the flashlight in his bag. Wait, said Mary. You saw us there? Yes, said Michael. He held up 3 fingers. Third rule, you can't try to change the past. Hank's ears perked up again. He crept toward the door. Michael spread his wings. I must go. Don't leave yet, said Mary. Keep your eyes open for Satan, the enemy, said Michael. He is causing a lot of trouble in Egypt and deceiving many people. Grrr, Hank growled at the door. Bang, bang! Mary looked at the door. Should we answer? Be careful, said Michael. Terrible things are coming. Michael spread his wings and shot out of the window like a lightning bolt. Bang, bang! What do we do? Said Mary. Chapter 6. The Great Magician. Bang, bang! Mary walked toward the door. Wait, whispered Peter. He ran over to the table, rolled up the scroll, and hid it in the leather bag. Then he threw the bag on the bed and sat on it. Okay, let them in. Mary swung the door open. The captain looked around suspiciously. What's going on in here? Nothing, said Peter. We're just getting ready for bed. The captain looked behind the curtain. I thought I heard a man's voice. Maybe you heard me, said Peter in his deepest voice. No, it was a man's voice, said the captain. Hank growled at the guard as the guard knelt down and looked under the bed. Maybe it was Hank, said Peter. His growl is pretty deep. The captain kept looking around. There's something fishy going on here. Sweat popped out on Peter's forehead. Nothing fishy is going on here, he said. Maybe you're smelling the Nile River. I don't trust you kids, said the captain. Hank growled again. Or your dog, said the captain. I'll be watching you. Good to know, said Peter. Makes me feel safe. The captain left, and Mary shut the door. That was close, said Peter. He unrolled the scroll on the table and looked at Mary. Have you read any books about hieroglyphics? A few, said Mary. I can tell there are 8 words by the way the symbols are arranged, but I don't recognize the symbols. Peter pointed at the first symbol. That one looks like a flag, he said. Is the first word flag? Said Mary. They waited. Nothing happened to the scroll. This might be harder than I thought, said Mary. Peter grabbed the adventure journal and sat on his bed. You keep trying to solve the secret of the scroll, he said. I've got a couple of things to write down. Day 1. Egypt is awesome, but very hot. I'm not a fan of camels. I could get used to living in the palace if it weren't for the slaves. The Egyptians treat them so badly. Princess Shafara seems pretty nice, but I'm worried about Michael's warning that terrible things are coming. Peter, Mary, and Hank climbed into their beds. A breeze blew the cool night air through the window as they drifted off to sleep. The morning sun reached Peter's eyes and he sat up in bed. Mary was already awake and looking at the scroll. Peter looked over her shoulder. Have you figured it out yet? Knock, knock. Hide it, whispered Mary. Peter put the scroll in the bag and hid it under the bed. Who is it? He asked. It's Joseph. Mary opened the door. Princess Shafara requests that you meet her down at the Nile River, said Joseph. Peter looked out the window and saw Princess Shafara swimming. Can you come with us? Said Peter. No, I can't, said Joseph. Why not? Said Mary. I have work to do. I'm not allowed to play, said Joseph. He lowered his head and walked out of the room. Hurry! Princess Shafara's voice floated through the window. We don't want to keep the princess waiting, said Peter. They ran down to the river. Princess Shafara splashed water on Peter. Get in! The water's perfect! Peter and Mary jumped in and swam over to Princess Shafara. They splashed and played in the Nile like it was a swimming pool back home. Peter looked up at the palace and saw Pharaoh and the magicians walking down to the river. Good morning, Dad, said Princess Shafara. Good morning, said Pharaoh. He looked out. My kingdom looks amazing this morning. Peter looked out and saw Moses and Aaron walking beside the river. Look who's back, said the great magician with an evil stare. Moses and Aaron drew closer. Moses stepped forward. The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to tell you to let his people go. No, said Pharaoh, I will not let them go. Moses replied, Then God has a message for you. He says, I will show you that I am God. Moses turned to Aaron and said, Raise your staff and strike the Nile River. Mary's eyes widened. Get out of the water! Why? Said Princess Shafara. Trust me, said Mary. Peter, Mary, and Shafara quickly swam toward the riverbank. Aaron swung his staff and hit the surface of the water. A red circle appeared at the spot he hit. It grew bigger and bigger. Hurry, said Peter. The dark circle filled the Nile River. Peter scrambled out just before the circle reached them. What is it? Said Princess Shafara. It looks like blood, said Mary. Gross! Shafara shuddered. Dead fish floated to the top of the river, and a strange stink filled the air. The great magician slowly clapped his hands. Nice little trick! He grabbed a pitcher of water and poured it on the ground. He held his staff above his head and stuck it into the puddle. He mumbled some words Peter couldn't understand. A red circle came from the bottom of the staff and filled the water. Pharaoh stuck his finger in the puddle and smelled it. Blood, he said. Pharaoh and the magicians turned and strolled into the palace like nothing had happened. Moses and Aaron shook their heads and walked away. The water was red for as far as Peter could see. That didn't go well, he said. Why won't your dad listen to Moses? Mary said. He is very stubborn, said Princess Shafara. He seems to listen to the magician in the purple robe, said Mary. Princess Shafara lowered her head and sighed. He spends more time with the great magician than with me. How long has he been helping your dad? Said Peter. For a long, long time, said Princess Shafara. The great magician was around before my dad was Pharaoh. He makes my skin crawl, said Peter. That is where we are leaving off until tomorrow night. I will see you back here, same place, same time tomorrow. Good night, everybody.